Mary Thomas Hart, and I have the distinguished pleasure of moderating this panel. I'll just let you all kind of go down the line and do quick introductions, and then we'll jump right into it. We only have 45 minutes, so we'll make the most of it.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Ashley McDonald. I'm the Executive Director of the National Grazing Lands Coalition. And as the name implies, we're a nonprofit that works with livestock grazing producers to improve soil health, improve forages, to improve their operations, the livestock that feeds the world.
Yep. Good afternoon, everyone. Jacob Gilley, cattle producer with JG Land and Livestock. Our operation is located about 2 to 3 hours south of here in Orange and Madison counties in Virginia, depending on traffic. My wife and I, we have 4 young children, ages 11 to 3. The 3-year-old's birthday is actually today. We background feeder cattle, we custom graze brood cows, we direct market some beef, a little bit of everything. And as of June of this year, I resigned from American Farmland Trust, where I was once the senior technical livestock and grazing specialist, and decided that wanted to get back onto the farm and farm full-time and doing some consulting around sustainable beef production, working with producers throughout the region.
Good afternoon, everyone. First off, thank you to Agri-Pulse and JBS for putting this on for this opportunity. My name is Brandon Reeves, and I'm a cow-calf producer from the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. Family similar to Jacob's and Dave's. We're cow-calf, and we background some feeder cattle. But I'm the weekend warrior on our farm. My day job is I have the privilege of being the executive director for the Virginia Cattlemen's Association, and really proud to represent our producers. We're an affiliate of NCBA, so know Mary Thomas well, and it's great to be here with you this afternoon.
Hi, I'm Dave Norford, owner and operator of Old Mountain Farm. I farm with my two of my sons. We raise beef cattle, alfalfa hay, corn, and some other crops, but our main crop is feeder cattle.
And my name is Mary Thomas Hart. I'm the Chief Counsel for the National Cattlemen's Beef Association based here in Washington, D.C. And I've been in that role for 8 years because I love talking about the sustainability of the U.S. beef and cattle supply chain. I think that this supply chain in particular has made so much progress over the last 6 to 7 decades. We've reduced our emissions per pound of beef by about 40%. We have the lowest emissions intensity of any beef producing nation in the world, and we produce about 18% of the world's beef with only 6% of the world's cattle. But I could spit those facts out all day. We'll go to the real experts, and let's start with Jacob. You're a military veteran and first-generation farmer. Tell us about how you got started and how you work to make your operation more sustainable.
Sure. Yeah. So my dad served 20 years in the Air Force. His last base was up here at Andrews. And so we actually lived in southern Maryland in Calvert County. Grew up in a subdivision, and don't know exactly how I was bit by the bug, but I was. Always interested in agriculture. It just fascinated me that you could take the sun and the rain and the soil and produce something that was edible and profitable. And so my family was originally from Virginia, and so we moved back there when I was entering 6th grade. And from that time forward, kind of started off in 4-H and FFA youth development programs, which were critical to my development in agriculture. Started with chickens, worked my way up to baby calves, and when I went to Virginia Tech for animal and poultry sciences and ag business, joined the Air National Guard as a C-130 airplane mechanic. Did that for 6 years and got out in 2011 and pretty much been involved in production agriculture the entire time, even while in the Air Force and then at Virginia Tech. And we've just kind of grown throughout the years. But I would say most of my nurturing, I guess, early on was through 4-H and FFA, and then other mentors, and then trade associations like NCBA, Virginia Forage and Grassland Council, Virginia Cattlemen Association have been instrumental in helping me kind of learn and grow.
Well, and talk a little bit about your time with American Farmland Trust and how that impacted or what you learned about what farmers are looking for and what farmers need when they come to a group like AFT.
Yeah, sure. So, was with American Farmland Trust for 6 years. AFT is a national nonprofit focused on agriculture conservation, based here in Washington D.C. I was with our Mid-Atlantic team, working out of my home farm in Virginia, and in that role, it was really great because I was able to engage with livestock producers, mostly cattle producers in Virginia, and help kind of provide them the support they needed to adopt conservation practices such as rotational grazing, cover crop grazing, programs that took into account wildlife. And so with AFT, I learned quite a bit. I thought it was the best job in the world because they were paying me to learn. I got to go to a lot of different conferences, talk to a lot of folks throughout the years. Actually, how I got to know you all better through the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. And in that time at AFT, we were able to take on-the-ground research and demonstration here in Virginia, and we were able to promote it more regionally and nationally with other producers. And really what I was doing was cultivating a cohort of producers to where they could lean on each other. They could talk about the challenges that they were facing, talking about the successes that they had faced. And we really focused on not only the conservation, but also the business aspects. You know, how do you become profitable in livestock and beef production? How do you improve your grazing? More of a holistic approach in comparison to what some others may take.
Thank you. We'll go to Dave next. Dave, you've been recognized within the state of Virginia as an outstanding conservation farmer. Tell us about your operation and the conservation practices that you've implemented.
Our operation it's located fairly close to Jacob, maybe 30 minutes away. We're in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, so there's been an emphasis for many years on stream exclusion, excluding livestock from water sources. We were early adopters of that, and our operation has won the Clean Water Farm of the Year award a couple times. We do rotational grazing, stockpiling, strip grazing, cover crop. I mean, pretty much everything that you're supposed to do, I guess. Let's put it that way. So, as I mentioned, I'm farming. My two of my sons have come back to the farm, and I always thought I wouldn't say, on the cutting edge of adapting new technology, but I thought I was, doing a pretty good job. They both went to Virginia Tech, studied ag, and graduated and came back. And there must be a class down there called Telling Your Old Man What He's Been Doing Wrong. Because I never knew of the mistakes I'd been making, but we're actually getting along. We're getting along very well. If any of you that have worked with family might know what I'm talking about, but we actually are really coexisting well. So we also are trying to, as much as possible, we want to graze our cattle as much as possible and feed as little stored hay and feed as possible. So our goal is to graze cattle 300 days out of the year, which is about 10 months. Some years we can do that pretty successfully, other years not so much. Depends on the weather. If we get some good rain in the fall and we can stockpile some grass, we can make it on through till February. If it's dry in the fall like it's been this fall, we probably are not going to make it. So we're trying to do as much grazing. We also do genetic testing on our cattle, try to pick out the females that exhibit the traits that we feel are best for our environment, to let those females thrive in our environment. And we try to pick those females out through genetic testing and then mate them to genetics that will enhance that cow, so that cow can be as profitable and last as long and stay with us as long as possible. We feel like that's a part of the sustainability, is keeping the cattle on the farm as long as possible.
Both of the kind of big points you mentioned, grazing management and genetics, I think a lot of producers and maybe just, consumers that don't really understand the industry might look at those and think those are, pretty costly investments. But how do you kind of manage the investment required to improve your operation and improve your herd? Do you see that come back in your bottom line?
Absolutely. I mean, if you develop a heifer to become a cow in your herd and she only lasts for 2 or 3 years, there's no way you could offset the cost associated with developing that heifer. But if she lasts 8, 9, 10 years, then she made you some money. I think I've read different articles. It takes 7 or 8 years, 7 or 8 calves before a cow really becomes profitable. So we've seen a lot of payback in the conservation things that we're doing, especially rotational grazing. It's allowing us to raise more cattle on the same amount of land efficiently. So we can continue to do that. We can continue to do stockpile grazing, continue to do strip grazing. All those things are working. If they come out with something new, we'll look at it.
I think it's fascinating when you talk about beef sustainability. Everyone has a different definition for that term, right? And so there have been a lot of concerted efforts within and out of the industry to create a definition and create standards for beef sustainability. But really, at the end of the day, it comes back to finding that perfect balance between social value, economic value, and environmental value, right? Because you could have the most ecosystem friendly operation in the world, but if it doesn't make money and eventually that person has to sell out and it turns into a Walmart parking lot, then you've lost all of that value, right? So the constant struggle to find and maintain that balance is something that everyone in our industry is working toward, I think, and has that shared goal. I'll go to Brandon next. So you grew up on your family's beef operation. How have you seen cow-calf operations evolve or change in that time?
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for that question. I think y'all heard Dave talk a lot about the genetics, and I'm going to throw out a term AI, and it doesn't mean what you think. And so one way that we've really dramatically improved the quality of our genetics and our herd is through AI breeding our heifers and developing them. And I think the way that our breeds and our industry has been able to collect data and use that data to then, convey back to producers and educate us on decisions that we need to make that would allow us to capture more value, create more quality animals that perform more efficiently, I think has been a tremendous improvement. And it's something that, we just started doing when I was a little guy, and we breed several hundred heifers every year now in the fall and spring. Another, management component is we used to just be spring calving. Now we're spring and fall calving, where we're able to use bulls on twice as many cows and some things like that. But back to just, producing more beef. I did a little bit of research coming up the road, USDA, ERS, and that we actually are producing 25% more beef from 1970 to 2020, 25% more beef with 6% less cattle. And those carcass weights are going up, and our cattle herd, we're at historic lows right now, and so I would love to see an updated chart of that. But that just goes to show you the value of those genetic investments and production practices that we're doing. We've got a really great story to tell, and it's been so cool to see those management practices kind of evolve over time.
Well, and I think that's a really excellent point, and it's something that it's pretty easy for us to take for granted in the United States. I think I said earlier we've been working for a few decades now to improve the genetics and the health of our herd. I was in Rome for a sustainable livestock conference a couple weeks ago, and it's you see the contrast between our production system, our supply chain, and developing supply chains that are just trying to get past a 50% mortality rate, right? They're trying to improve kind of the basic foundational qualities of their herd. And we've, worked hard for the last few decades, and we have the privilege to kind of tweak things, right? And really continue to refine the quality of our herd. So to that point, for your members, Brandon, for the members of the Virginia Cattlemen's Association and members of NCBA, how does animal health play a role in this sustainability conversation? You get the good genes, but then taking care of the animal throughout their life.
Absolutely. Well, it's critical. It's so important, especially with the price of cattle now. It's you don't want to lose one. And so our association, our members, we take it very seriously. at Virginia Cattlemen's, the three main things that we want to do is maximize producer profitability, be the trusted voice for producers, and get them the education and resources that they need to best manage their herds. The education and resources, a lot of that comes on the animal health side of things. So focusing on that, our association actually helped develop a branded program, Virginia Quality Assured program. We saw the value in weaning cattle for a certain number of days and in vaccination protocol. And so we developed a program, a VQA program, I think it was back in 1997, that has grown and gets all of our producers kind of educated and on the same page. And we've been able to really increase the health of our herds and increase the value. Those gold and purple tags are they're looked upon very favorably by our feedlot customers.
Thanks, Brandon. Ashley, you're up next. But before we go to Ashley, I just want to say to the room, we'll probably take a couple questions from the audience. So after Ashley goes, if you have a question, feel free to come to either of the mics here, and we'll take a couple questions from the audience. Ashley, how does your organization, the National Grazing Lands Coalition, assist producers in implementing improvements to grazing lands?
Sure, and thanks, Mary Thomas, and thanks for moderating today as well. But NAGLC for short, so I don't have to say it over and over again. We were formed in the early 90s by livestock organizations like NCBA and the American Sheep Industry Association and others, and individual livestock producers, because of a concern that resources around technical assistance were going down at an alarming rate. And from everything that we know being in the livestock producer space, the need, of course, is still very much there. You're hearing, of course, from three top-notch producers. We still have a lot of knowledge to be able to pass and continually educating, and our producers do a great job, and they have done a great job. But part of our mission, led by producers, is that there's always more to do. There's always new research to do and to find out answers so that we can continue that path of improved efficiency and stay the most sustainable beef and livestock production system in the world. And so that's what we try to do. We work with partners, whether that is through USDA and our government partners, whether that is through partners at the state level, private supply chain companies that we've worked with quite a bit. And it seems like we're working more and more with over time as I think they're coming more and more to the realization that it's hard to reach producers, it's hard to communicate with producers, it's hard to involve producers in an industry that is so built on trust. And do you know this guy? There's a lot of mistrust, and for very good reason. We heard on the last panel, a lot of fly-by-night companies, a lot of shady contracts, a lot of those things, and for good reason. There's a lot of hesitation out there to engage. And so organizations like mine, and what I think we do a really good job of is kind of being somewhere in between. We're led by livestock producers. We keep our focus on what's good for producers, and then try to have the expertise to be able to vet those types of programs, vet those companies to make sure that the producer is somewhat protected. And then we can advocate for those programs and be able to put those out with frankly, a lot of genuineness. I think our industry, I think I heard the last panel say simplicity and fairness. And I wrote that down because I think that sums up very much what we try to do when we work with producers, is make sure what they are working with us on is to their benefit. It's not only to society's benefit, to the environment's benefit, but also to their operational benefit.
NatGLC recently began accepting participants in its Legacy Lands program. So tell us a little bit about that and how it's going, and what you anticipate that Legacy Lands will be able to bring to this conversation and to the industry.
Yeah, appreciate the plug there, and I'll just shamelessly take it. But I think Jason mentioned it earlier, but the idea of public-private partnerships and de-risking it, not only for the producer but others I think there's a lot of wisdom there from what I have seen. I've seen a lot of programs fail for a lot of different reasons. And a big one is that it's all on one side or it's all on the other. And frankly, there's not enough in that equation to make it worth these guys' time to do. We have very much learned that their time and the cost of implementation are real costs. And there are a lot of programs out there that just simply do not value them at the level that it does cost. And so the Legacy Landscapes program, and again, my organization is one of the partners with Nestle Purina, Wendy's, and others that takes and then also has some public contributions or government dollars as well to, again, as he said earlier, be able to de-risk it for the producer, to actually provide them with enough funding to be able to pay for a watering system that needs to run a pipeline for a mile into an allotment in Arizona, right? To be able to utilize those forages to the optimal level that they can be. That takes a lot of capital. And so to be able to do that through a partnership, through this public-private partnership, I think is huge. And we have a ton of interest. This program covers Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Texas, Nebraska, Kansas, and Missouri. So a fairly decent size geographic area, but it's significant. It's significant resources for the producer in terms of implementation dollars. Also pays for educational opportunities to be able to go places. A record keeping or a farm management system. If you've been to Cattlemen's College recently, you've heard NCBA talk about the need for our industry to really take a pretty good step towards digitizing our records and getting those things down for the next generation, as well as to actually see really things that we can hone in on the profit and loss side. And so it focuses on providing those types of resources as well as technical assistance and marketing support. So what are we going to do with those calves when they reach their weight, right? There's options. There's options for producers, and not every option is right for every single producer. So sometimes talking to experts to give you options is exactly what we need. So hopefully what we have crafted, and the last panel talked about this too, is adaptability, and it's something we preach to producers, right? We work in production agriculture, we work in a dynamic environment, have to be able to adapt to changing. Well, programs are no different. Organizations are no different. I've been talking to some of our conservation organizations about the same thing. If you're going to preach it, we should probably practice it ourselves. And so I think we have been lucky to work with, because not all companies are also not created equal, just like programs. And to find a company like Nestle Purina Pet Care and Wendy's who are willing to adapt a program based on feedback from producers, I think is a big deal as well. So that's a couple things about it. The other thing I'll leave you with, because we talked about it a little bit, is flexibility or the opposite of that, prescriptiveness in programs. I think has been a detrimental thing that so many of them have done. You shall do this practice, or this practice. The grazing industry is probably one of the most complex. and you can talk to 100 ranchers even within 30 minutes of each other, and they're probably all going to come up with something different that meets their goals and their needs on their operation. And so being flexible with the practices that are allowed in the program, I think is a huge thing too. And it's been a learning experience. There is simplicity in knowing you have three options, but there's that's also inflexibility, right? To be able to do what the environment and what the operation needs. And so this program also works on the broad buckets of a grazing management plan with an animal health component or a grazing management plan with a forage quality component. And so if it, at the end of the day, is going to make your operation more efficient, you're going to produce more calves, you can be able to carry more pairs on that same piece of property, or they're going to stay healthier in that time period and have a better operation. Not only are you going to realize, because you're going to have less inputs and have more profit in general, but also you're contributing less greenhouse gas emissions. You can probably have better water retention to be more drought resilient, et cetera. So we work with producers. First and foremost, it's a relationship business. We work with producers one-on-one to talk about their operation, their operational goals, their operational needs, and then hopefully there is something that we know of, this program included, that might work for them. But again, we try to meet the producers where they are, because there is not a shortage of needs for technical assistance, for practice implementation dollars. And so we know we have plenty of that out there, and so it's a matter of how do we get that to the right people at the right time in the right way.
I think your point on flexibility is so important, especially when we're talking about grazing ruminants. In the broader universe of American agriculture, you have cattle grazing in all 50 states in the United States, and it's tough to find another segment of U.S. agriculture that has that same stat. And so it really is incumbent on people designing programs that are private-public, on our experts at USDA and EPA and FDA, to take that into account. So I might go down the line and ask, thoughts on the need for flexibility in developing programs like this impacts if you're a producer. I think that it's worth spending a little time on. I'm also just going to do another plug for questions from the audience. I have questions that I'll ask, but I think it's always good to get thoughts from out in the room. So maybe down the line, just would be interested in your thoughts. And we got Ashley's. Yeah, Ashley's off the hook.
Yeah, I mean, so interestingly, when I was with American Farmland Trust, we were working on the Partnership for Climate Smart Commodities program, released by USDA, and that was many years in the making, and our project was a $30 million project that we were working on to engage with producers, develop out those mentor networks, do extensive soil sampling to kind of showcase and prove that responsible grazing management across many different landscapes can actually be good for the environment. And so speaking about flexibility, with the bureaucracy and it was a bit of a challenge, but the way we wrote the proposal, there was a lot of flexibility within that, and then after it was funded, it wasn't quite as flexible as we had hoped. And producers, like Ashley mentioned, time is of the essence, and even like the brain space time, like that's something that didn't really hit me until this year. Especially when I went out on my own, it's like it's not even the time I'm spending doing each activity, but it's the time in between those that I'm thinking about other things other than, it's super valuable. And so having that flexibility to work within our context, so our precipitation, not every year is the same, and that's where grazing management plans, really good grazing management plans are flexible that take into account contingencies. If we don't see this much rain by this date, then we're gonna look at doing this. Or if the market changes and goes to here, then we're gonna adapt and sell. So flexibility is everything when it comes to the sustainability of the beef industry.
Yeah, I'll echo what Jacob said. I mean, I think even just within Virginia, the topography of our state is so different from where Dave raises cattle and our farm is at, let alone the country where we've got federal lands and, all kinds of things. And so I think that having that flexibility is key. I mean, obviously you want to have enough guidelines and guardrails to make sure you're accomplishing the purpose of the program, right? So you don't want to make it so flexible that it doesn't accomplish the goal that you're set out to accomplish. But I think that flexibility is key. And then we've seen the weather patterns be really crazy, especially here in Virginia the past couple years. I mean, we've had some severe droughts, we've had some downpours, flooding events, and so having flexibility to kind of be able to react appropriately in those circumstances, I think is really important.
Yeah, this comes pretty close to some real life experiences I've had with working with the Soil and Water District at home on some stream exclusions. The rule used to be you had to exclude a stream 35 feet on each side of the stream, and that was it in order to qualify for cost share. Well, all farms are not the same. One size does not fit all. My neighbor was looking at doing it, and he's like, well, by the time I do that, I won't have any farm left. There won't be anything left. Now there's a little more flexibility in the program, but still, there could be room for more. I mean, it's better to have half of a bucket full of water than none, I would think. And so we need more of that. We need more real world, okay, this won't work here, but how can we make it work? And we don't have a lot of that yet.
Ashley, did you have an additional thought?
Well, it's kind of going in a different direction, but I'm going to go there anyway because it does relate to flexibility. But the last panel did talk about kind of the changing world of the greenhouse gas accounting and what I call the carbon gods. And the carbon gods have their standards, and then they change them, and it has been really hard on companies. And then to reiterate to somebody like my organization what they need. And this constantly changing, I can't keep going to these guys and saying, well, now I actually need to do this, or actually, can we change it? Sorry, I said stockers, but now we can't have stockers. We got to have just cow-calf, like stuff like that. I have been seeing, and I just give kudos to those of you in the room that might have been part of some of these conversations, but pushing back a little bit on those to say, look, we have to have something that we can work with, that everybody, back down to the producer can work with, and we have to stick with it for a gosh darn minute. Our program is only 4 years, which what we were talking about earlier makes it a little bit better, but it makes it, just pushing back on it, I just give kudos to those who are starting to do some of that. Sorry, I cut the question.
We have a question from the audience.
Hi, my name is Christine Morgan, and I'm the Chief Scientific Officer at the Soil Health Institute. And my question is for Ashley. I'm really curious about, if you could choose one or two things that you had access to or that could be created for you to advance your mission of education technical assistance, what would it be?
A couple things that we could get access to. Well, so I do think, and again, I'm going off in a slightly different direction. I think one of the biggest challenges, and based on the latest census, is we have a giant percentage of U.S. agricultural land that's poised to change hands in the next 2 decades. But we also, especially in the cattle industry, have a woefully high percentage of operations that have absolutely no transition plan in place. And that is a scary position, I think, for our industry to be in. So to me, I connect it all because, if I look at Dave or Jacob or Brandon, they have to operate across all these different areas. They're trying to take care of the soil health. They're trying to produce forages. They're trying to take care of their cattle and improve the genetics. They're hoping for rain, and they're trying to manage taxes and all kinds of things, right? They have to manage for everything. And so I think I believe we have to do the same in all of our organizations, and try to think of all those things. So if we don't have a grazing plan in place, and part of that is a herd health plan, and part of that is, what regulations are we talking about, or maybe talking to Mary Thomas about fighting, and what are we going to do long term? What is our succession plan? What is our how do we pass it down? Our kids coming back do we not have any kids that are coming back, and do we want to try to find a mentorship program to pass it on to a producer, maybe a first generation producer that has not, that doesn't have that kind of access to a family operation. So that would be a big thing. That's a big thing on my mind every day, is how do I bake into everything that we do some way to help with succession planning workshops, maybe some funding to help with the fees, legal fees, accounting fees, all the things that go along with that, as part of the bigger picture, right? Because again, I don't think it's fair that these guys have to manage for everything and we want to laser focus on one thing, whether it's carbon or whether it's water or whatever. I think we have to do the same thing. We have to look at the operation, we have to look at the industry as a whole and help. And that is technically the definition of sustainability.
Well, and I think internationally we've seen a shift from this like hyper laser focus on greenhouse gas emissions to a broader look at, even in the environmental space, holistic environmental health, recognizing, that for years there's been criticism of the greenhouse gas emissions from cattle production and specifically grazing cattle. But if you take that away, you also lose grasslands, you lose wildlife habitat, you lose soil carbon sequestration, you lose natural water filters. Things that are pretty unique to the cattle industry in the United States. So I think that was
and that's hard to quantify. A lot of those
Exactly.
things we're
Yeah.
still working on, trying to figure out how do we quantify, right? Yep. Like as much focus has been on carbon, that's still changing. Yep. And how do we do biodiversity and everything else uniformly across the globe, or somehow break it up. I think it's next on the horizon, but yep. But it's something that we, speaking of the Soil Health Institute, how do we get kind of those standards and be able to apply those and get credit ultimately to where credit is due, which is especially to these guys who have been doing it for 30 years, and then at the same time help out those who may be new or haven't done it yet.
Another question from the audience.
Yes, my name is Rudy Arredondo, Latino Farmers and Ranchers International. And this is addressed to Ms. Hart, and also another one to Ms. McDonald. One is, we're members of RCAF, and we're extremely concerned with the checkoffs that NCBA is using, which we feel is being misused. So we'd like to see if that's going to be corrected. And the question to Ms. McDonald is, we have lost over 6,000 acres of forest grazing land in New Mexico and 400 generational homes, and we're still dealing with it. So how are we going to be able to mitigate some of that in this coming season? We're very concerned about that. Now I'll wait for questions. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start with the New Mexico specific question. I think it's a great one. We've seen similar devastation in other states as well this past spring. So there is a lot. I do want to be a positive person, and I'll do the glass half full, which with my legal training is not usually where I am, but I'll do it today. So I look at that as, gosh, we have an opportunity if we can provide the resources and the human and the financial resources to help get those things back in order. I think what I am seeing, I feel like across supply chain, is there is a desire. You saw PepsiCo up here earlier. We work with a few of them. There's a whole bunch of food companies out there and non-food companies, frankly, that are interested in that restoration work. I think the hard part, and this probably gets better at your question, the hard part is the connection. And we're a team of 12, so it's not like we have thousands of people that can do that on a daily basis. But I think that is the hard part is connecting. And that is our job, but is connecting that need to where good programs or good funding through good companies or USDA and NRCS or other sources, philanthropic foundations, et cetera. There is a lot of desire to work with work in that space on restoration. Forests, for example, there's plenty of work going on there as well. But it will take a lot of resources, as you well know. But I'd love to talk to you, afterwards about what those opportunities are, because I think they are out there if we can match those things up.
And the beef checkoff is heavily audited by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, as are its contractors. The work that I do here is paid for by 25 to 26,000 beef producers that are members of NCBA and state affiliate beef cattlemen's associations across the nation. And I'm so grateful to those producers that put their trust in me to represent them in DC every day. So a question for the full panel. What do you think is a common misconception among the general public about livestock production or cattle production?
I would say, one, I would hope that there are some misconceptions, because sadly, I think there's a lot of consumers that probably don't even think about it. They're used to having that steak or that burger off the menu. They order it, and I hope they think about it, but maybe they don't. But if there was a misconception, I would say that all cattle production is out west. It's like you think about ranchers, you think about out west, and that ranchers and farmers are super rich and have tons of land. But here in Virginia, where I'm a producer, I lease 95% of my land, so I rent it from absentee landowners. And if they determine that they want to sell to a development or solar installation, or if they have a misconception that grazing is negative for the environment, versus we know that that's not true, and I lose that land, then all of a sudden I'm out of business. And so we have lands here on the East Coast that are very important for the beef supply chain, and that we do a good job of taking care of those lands with our livestock.
So for years, I've heard it almost as a cliche. People don't know where their food comes from. And chocolate milk comes from brown cows. And I'm like, no one really thinks that. I don't really think that's not real. So I was at the county fair. My kids were showing steers at the county fair. And my son had his steer all ready for the show, all shined up and washed and fluffed out and everything. And he went to change his shirt for the show, and he said, "Would you hold the steer?" So I was standing there holding the steer, and this nice older lady comes by, and she says, "Oh, he's gorgeous. He's just beautiful. Can I touch him?" I'm like, "Sure, go ahead." "Oh, he's magnificent. What do you do with him?" I said, "Well, you eat him." She said, "No way." I'm like, "Yeah, well, do you like meat?" "Well, I do like a good steak," she said. I said, "Well, here you go." She had no clue that that's where meat came from. And that hit home for me, because I didn't think that was real, that there really were people like that. But she was just a normal looking, nice lady, just had no clue whatsoever. So I guess we need to keep working on that aspect of it.
That's hilarious. And if y'all only knew, there's so many stories like that go on at state fairs and county fairs across the country. But, one of the bigger misconceptions I think that people have about the beef industry is just how complex it is. You think about all the different segments that are involved in our industry, from cow-calf to backgrounder to feedlot to packer to wholesaler to retailer, and it is incredible. And we need, as a Cattlemen Association, we're a cow-calf state, but we need each of those segments to be successful. And it's so important to us. We talked about the checkoff. Why do we have high cattle prices right now? Well, it's because we have exceptional demand. I mean, yes, are other factors involved in that? Certainly. But we've done a really great job as an industry investing in ourselves, promoting our product. We've got an awesome product. So excited to be on the production end and be able to improve on that. But we've got beef. That's what's for dinner, right? And so I think that there's a lot of misconception as to how complex our industry is, both here in the States and then on the global scale.
That's a pretty good answer. And got a lot in and only went 2 minutes over time. So please join me in welcoming our esteemed, thanking our esteemed panel. We go again. Thank you all so much.